To the east, in the direction of the Nile, were Khufu's temple and the temple of the Sphinx, where both pharaoh and stone creature could be worshipped. A covered ramp led from the right rear of the Sphinx to the temple at the base of the pyramid. While the pyramid was new, the surface of the Sphinx was scored by weather, having been there since the beginning of Egypt in the time over 7,000 years earlier when the gods had ruled. Between the paws of the great Sphinx stood the pharaoh Khufu, under whose leadership the Egyptians had labored for 20 years, moving stone after stone to build the Great Pyramid. The pharaoh prostrated himself in front of a statue set before the creature's stone chest. The statue was 3 meters tall and roughly man-shaped with polished white skin. The dimensions weren't quite right. The body was too short and the limbs were too long. The ears had elongated lobes that reached to just above the shoulders, and there were 2 gleaming red stones in place of eyes. On top of the head, the stone representing hair was painted bright red. Even more strangely for the astute observer, each hand ended in 6 fingers. The statue's appearance was in great contrast to Khufu's dark skin and hair and human proportions. The Sphinx had been squatting in its stone depression for ages, beyond the dawn of the time of pharaohs. Only a handful of those alive knew why it had been built or what it marked. For all but a chosen few, it was forbidden to come to the area between the paws and worship in front of the statue. Khufu had succeeded his father when he was just out of his teens, and he was now middle-aged. He had ruled for 3 decades, and Egypt was at peace with those outside its borders and rich within its own boundaries. The peace and wealth had allowed Khufu to implement the building plan for Giza that had been passed from the gods to the shadows to the pharaohs over the 3 ages. The vast quantity of stone needed for the pyramid had been quarried upriver and brought down by barge. Thousands had labored seasonally on it, moving the stone from the barges and placing each block in its position under the careful eye of engineer priests who worked from the holy plans that had been handed down. The red capstone had been brought up from the bowels of the Giza Plateau, from one of the duats, underground chambers, along the tunneled roads of Rostau, where only the gods and their priests were allowed to walk. No one knew what exactly it was, but they had followed the drawings they had been given to the last detail, from the smooth limestone facing to placing the red object at the capstone at the very top. In the pharaoh's left hand, as he prostrated himself, was a scepter, a foot long and 2 inches in diameter, with a lion's head on one end. The lion image had red eyes similar to that of the statue, but these glowed fiercely, as if lit from within. Khufu had been awakened just minutes ago by his senior priest Asim. The staff had been in the trembling man's hand, the lion eyes glowing. He had passed it to the pharaoh. Khufu had thrown on a robe and dashed from his palace to his place before the Sphinx, as he had been told by his father he must do if the staff ever came alive. He was now chanting the prayers he had been taught. The statue was of Horus, the son of Isis and Osiris, the gods who'd founded Egypt at the dawn of time and ruled during the First Age. According to what Khufu had been told by his father and the priests, in the First Age, the gods had ruled for many years before passing leadership on to shadows of themselves, the followers of Horus, during the Second Age. Then even the shadows had passed the mantle on to men, and the first pharaohs took command of the Middle Kingdom of the Third Age. Asim was the only other person in the area. He was the senior priest of the cult of Isis and garbed in a red robe. The priest's right arm was withered and deformed where muscles and tendons had been sliced when he was a child. Where his left eye had been, there was an empty socket, the skin around it charred and scarred from the red-hot poker that had taken out the eyeball. Both ankles and calves were carefully bound to allow the priest to move, as the tendons in his legs had also been partially severed when he was a child. He could not run or even walk quickly. The priest had also been castrated before puberty. The mutilation was what was required of the head priest of the cult, and both Khufu and Asim knew there was a method to the madness. The idea was to make Asim's life so miserable that while he would be able to perform his duties, he would not desire to live a long life, and thus not hunger for the source of immortality, the Grail, that was said to be located somewhere below them, beyond the statue before which Khufu bowed his head. The scepter that Asim had brought Khufu was the key to the roads of Rostau, the underground passageways that ran beneath their feet, and Asim and his followers were the only ones who had ever walked those roads. Around Asim's neck was a medallion with an eye carved in the middle, a symbol of his office. The priesthood he was part of traced its lineage back many, many years, to the time even before the First Age of Egypt, when the people lived in the center of the great sea beyond the Middle Sea, into which the Nile emptied, in the lands of the gods, before they were cast out.